Hello again, this is Victor James, author of the Megacosm, and let's once again fight your toxic masculinity with more toxic masculinity by filling that vigilante urge with Death Wish 3. There was a time in the 80s when you heard this music. That meant you were going to see a bunch of street scum getting killed. Following the success of Death Wish 1 and 2, Death Wish 3 has a special place in my heart because it dropped most of the pretenses of being a drama and embraced its protagonist, Paul Kersey, as a straight-up vigilante. Plus, its ending was so epic and had such a high body count that we used to play Death Wish 3 on the streets as kids just for fun. In the first Death Wish, Paul's wife was murdered and his daughter was left catatonic by the shock from an assault by vicious gang members. Paul was a conscientious objector during the Korean War, which means he did not want to fight, but Paul sought revenge not just against the scum who harmed his family, but against all criminals, often luring them into fatal confrontations. And Paul repeats this tactic in Death Wish 2. Paul's daughter Carol is finally well enough to leave the mental hospital after years, but is soon accosted by more thugs, who are responsible for her death as she flees from their assault. The 80s really didn't play around. I say all this to set up Death Wish 3. Set 4 years after Part 2, Paul returns to New York, because of course it's New York, to visit a friend Charlie who he knew from the war. This movie features probably one of the most vicious gangs of the Death Wish series, who controls square blocks of turf that police are scared to patrol. The gang terrorizes citizens who are too poor to move, all except Charlie, who refuses to pay their protection fees. Charlie is attacked by 3 of the gang members, mercilessly beaten to death as his neighbors hear his screams but do nothing to interfere out of fear. Paul arrives too late to help his friend, but Charlie's last words to Paul were to watch his things until he gets back. When the cops arrive, they arrest Paul for Charlie's death, and he's placed in a cell with the leader of the vicious gang that murdered Charlie, named Fraker, by the police captain who remembers Paul as the vigilante from the events of the first movie. On a side note, I always thought this scene was hilarious because I have no idea what this guy was trying to accomplish.
Looking for trouble, man?
Once Paul and the captain come to an agreement, like men are supposed to, Paul is unleashed on the gang with tacit backing from the police force. And this is the premise for Death Wish 3, as Paul goes about methodically taking out the trash. He befriends the beleaguered residents, setting up traps to keep the vermin out of their homes, and luring the gang into shootouts only he can win.
Now you gonna die.
But this gang actually fights back. Fraker is by far the best villain of all 3 Death Wish movies. He's smart, vicious, cunning, and absolutely devoid of emotion. Life means nothing to Fraker, and that evil permeates into his gang as they strike back at Paul through the residents he is trying to protect.
Hurt him.
Paul is forced to change tactics, and that is what sets Death Wish 3 apart from its predecessors. I mean, the amount of violence is massive, as the number of extras who was blown away by our vigilante had to be a record at the time. In fact, so many people were shot as Paul takes back the city that YouTuber Razorfist actually sells a t-shirt celebrating the body count. Even though the movie is decades old, Death Wish 3 still holds up today as people never lose the thirst for someone to come along and clean up the mess that politicians allowed to fester. There were a string of vigilante movies in the 80s because of the rapid crime wave of that decade, and Death Wish 3 stands out as a triumph amongst them all. I often see Death Wish 3 playing for free on Tubi, but it makes its rounds on streaming services, so give it a try. So as usual, you can buy my book, Fiasco Adventures, on Amazon. I have it in paperback, it's also available in Kindle, and I also have the first chapter of Fiasco Adventures on my website, themegacosm.com. So you can read the first chapter, see if it's something that you're interested in, and think about buying. I also have a Substack where I have more chapters of my novel Fiasco Adventures, and I also have my short stories in here. So if you want to read those for free, everything on here is for free. So this is just kind of a preview, see if there's something that you want to buy. But that's all I have to say about this right now. God bless you and keep you. That's it, I'm done.